Welcome to another edition of Be the Change Georgia, where we amplify the voices of the inspiring business leaders surrounding the B Corp and social impact movements across the Southeast to help you learn how to build your legacy at the intersection of people, planet, purpose, and profit. Today, there are more than 8,000 B Corps in over 80 countries and 180 different industries, unified by one common goal: transforming the global economy to benefit all people, communities, and the planet. If you want to learn how to plug into our purpose-driven business community alongside the inspiring leaders we feature on this show, check us out at blocalgeorgia.com or on Instagram or Facebook at blocalgeorgia, and we'll hope to meet you at our next event. Today's guest is Ebony Adams, Director of DEI at Pariveda, a consulting firm focused on helping people reach their highest potential. Ebony Adams is an experienced DEI professional with a commitment to transformational movements, strategies, and environments. Her extensive background at progressive nonprofits and in post-secondary education has provided the opportunities to explore new theories of change with diverse audiences. On today's episode, Ebony shares the urgency of evolving DEI beyond performative actions, the power of authentic leadership during times of cultural and political shift, and why fostering relationships across communities is essential to lasting impact. If you're a business leader navigating DEI in today's climate, or just someone committed to building a more inclusive world, you won't want to miss this episode. Enjoy. Ebony Adams, welcome to Be the Change Georgia. Excited to finally have you on the show.
I'm excited to talk to you, shake the table a little bit.
Yeah, no, and I'm trying to remember, who was it? Was it Adrian Gershom that connected us from Be Local, Illinois?
Yeah, and I am incredibly grateful. I've got some colleagues who've worked with you as well, and everybody said, Nathan's the man, please go talk to him, and I was really delighted to get the invitation to join you.
Tell them their check's in the mail.
All right.
No, Adrian, it's funny how this B Corp world triangulates too, though, where we just, good people meeting good people. So excited. We had a little getting to know you call, and it went an hour over the 30 minutes that we were supposed to have. So we probably could have recorded that and just put that out to the world, but we'll formally record a podcast episode.
Yeah, I will try and deliver additional quality, but hopefully I didn't burn the pod by sharing, too much goodness in our getting to know you call.
I have a quota on smart things that come out of my mouth, so we'll see if we...
Me too. There's a limited number, so I'll see what I can do.
Sweet. Well, I'm excited to have you on because you are leading DEI, which I always look around and wait for the lightning to strike in 2025. Right. But you're leading DEI at a time where everybody's eliminating that position at Pariveda too, a big B Corp. What drives your continued commitment to this work? And I would even say probably from a corporate standpoint, from a B Corp standpoint, the fact that we didn't change your title, we didn't move you down the hall into a different office, but what drives their commitment, your commitment, and where do you see momentum in this work going forward when everybody kind of feels like we've kind of grinded to a halt?
Yeah. I was thinking about my answer to this question, and I really like the way that Grant Ferret, who is a professor of Africana Studies at Cornell, expressed this on the Black Studies podcast, when he was asked, sort of what drives your commitment to the study of Black life. And he said, this study for me it's idiomatic, by which, we mean it's natural, and it's axiomatic, right? It's self-evident. So this is the language that I speak, DEI or JEDI, as we call it at the company that I work for. It's the language I speak, whether I'm at work or not, whether I'm employed or not, whether I'm paid for it or not, because these are my concerns. I'm a Black woman. I'm solidly Gen X, who also identifies as queer and so as long as the accretion of those identities, right, that intersectionality, if you will, also carries with it an accretion of oppressions, I have to do this work. I must do this work. But crucially, And I'm hoping you're going to give me an amen on this one. This work is not for me alone or even people like me. So if you're a straight cisgender man, a straight white cisgender man, right? These issues are or should be just as urgent a task for you because no one's privilege is immutable. Okay. White supremacy, misogyny, homophobia, labor alienation, like these are ravenous, omnivorous beasts, and they won't be satisfied with yesterday's meals. They are always looking for more meat. So until everyone is involved, not just interested but involved, in the evolution towards a more just world, we're going to keep having these conversations as if DEI Jedi are nice to have elements of an activist group, of a methodology, of an epistemology, of a company, instead of a must-have, instead of being like, load-bearing walls. So as I say, like, I do this because of who I am. And where I see momentum is in like deepening solidarity. We have all got our key concerns, right? And it can be incredibly singular. So you might see reflections of your struggle and my struggle, but my struggle is my own. And like the oppressions of Black people, for instance, and oppressions of queer people, they may share some generic contours, but they're not the same. And we have to allow people to understand and name their oppressions in ways that make sense to them in the language that they speak, because solidarity doesn't come from enforcing a kind of lingua franca of activism, because there's no lingua franca of oppression, right? There's no common language of it. But nevertheless, I'm really heartened when I see, activist communities coming together to say, hey, I may not understand your struggles as you define and understand them, but your full humanity is just as important to me as my full humanity is important to me. And I will raise holy hell when I see that you're not included, or when you're disrespected, or when you're victimized by the police, or when you're targeted by ICE, right? There are incredible protests happening right now in the streets of Los Angeles, which is where I live. And when I see like the renewing of the faith between Black and Brown communities on the streets, I get excited. I just get excited by it. And I'm really galvanized personally by like the increasing focus on disability rights, disability justice, and like the platforming of really incredible thought leaders like Imani Barbarin or Alice Wong, because they're just like these fearless, relentless minds who are speaking truth to power and demanding a complete overhaul of the way that we think. So they're saying yesterday's DEI, with its sort of narrow, areas of focus, should not be what we do today. And we will keep speaking up in meetings. We will keep making people uncomfortable. We will, keep insisting on a full humanity, full equity in the ways that we live and work. And so that's where I'm excited. I'm less excited by the purely theoretical and more excited by what people are doing on the ground, in community rec centers, in, the back of the barbershop or whatever, and how that translates up as opposed to things coming from the top and being translated downwards.
Yeah, we had a really good conversation in our getting to know you planning call that went so long about the purely theoretical, because, you're starting to see, at least it's my hope, that the momentum here is this, I had a really good friend, Chad, who's been on the podcast, and, we were talking about like, did we have to go through some of this?
Mm-hmm.
I won't call it performative, awareness, knowledge, learning, even though you're just now learning where the interstates were built, huh?
Right.
If we did have to go through that, though, for this next iteration, whatever you want to call it, of like, it's like the action era now. And I think I kind of share your optimism that it's the community, even in the, we had a long conversation about that too, of like the Stokely Carmichael, like some of this philosophy of like, go organize your own community and come back. And then we can, but I think you're starting to see these communities have organized, and now we're all starting to team up. And I think we're going to have to, right? At least for the foreseeable future.
Right. I don't see a way for us to do it without that. Like the forces of power in this country depend upon us being separate, depend upon us not acknowledging, how much stronger we are together than apart. And listen, I get it, right? So when we talk about the 92%, when we talk about like the work that Black women have done and the way that we vote and everything, I get when people say like, I'm tired, I'm going to sit out XYZ, because I don't see how that immediately affects me, whether it's the struggle for Palestinian rights, or whether it's, talking about like immigration justice, et cetera, right? Like, I don't see this immediate effect on me, so maybe I'm going to sit this one out. But I think there are fewer voices carrying that message than voices saying, we show up for others, they show up for us, and this is how we get things done, right? It is, nothing scares power more than the recognition on the part of the oppressed that all of the might is on our side. So yeah, it's, as you say, like, get your own house in order, but be doing the work. Don't just be talking the talk, but are you walking the walk? Who knows you? Who claims you? Right? Not just who do you claim, but who claims you? When we talk about community and who people are working on behalf of, you talk about, I'm a XYZ kind of activist or a critical thinker or whatever. Would any of those people recognize you? Do any of them know you? Do any of them break bread with you? Do any of them go to church with you? Like shoot hoops with you? Whatever, like where is your community? Does it only exist within the confines of your own mind and in the books you read? There's a space for that. There's a space for the purely theoretical. But for me, I'm more interested in the realm of the real. And okay, I get there's problems. There's problems with that. And I'm sure people I went to grad school with are going to be like, actually, let's talk about, but that's just how I feel about it.
Yeah. Well, and it's been one of my frustrations now. It's like, okay, like show me, don't tell me anymore. Like I'm kind of done with the tell me. And I think, but again, I think maybe there's a certain responsibility people, the practitioners in the field and the people who feel this is their calling have done is like, okay, it's also our obligation to make sure people don't finish that. Like, okay, I learned the theoretical, I read the books, and I'm good now. And it's like, no, now we get to apply our learnings. Now it's an experiential project. We can still say we're in grad school or whatever, but we're gonna work with a real company or something and actually apply everything we've learned. So speaking of learned, like lessons learned, with the evolution of DEI, like how do we use these lessons now to create more sustainable, more impactful, like in the keyword outcome driven solutions moving forward? Because we're speaking the same language. But yeah.
One of the things that I continually have to introduce into conversations with leadership, and internally and externally, is a reminder of like how clear we have to be about the distinction between audience and constituents. So who's listening, who's learning, and who are we working on, behalf of, right? So DEI has been a very sort of hodgepodge kind of approach to addressing inequality in our societies and our workplaces, et cetera. But there hasn't been a lot of clarity about, well, who are you working on behalf of, right? So if this is on behalf of women, the queer people in your employee base, Black people, Asian people, whatever, then your sort of messaging needs to contain this, or your program should contain this, versus are you doing something purely to educate or purely to try and convince people of the utility of certain DEI programs that you're trying to execute on, right? So like we have to constantly be asking ourselves, who's our audience and then who's our constituents, right? I'm interested in thinking through or talking to people more about what happens. Gosh, okay, this is where I go off the rails, right? And I'm gonna get in trouble. But at a certain point, how much energy do I have to expend educating someone, encouraging them to empathize, trying to persuade them of the justice involved in the work that I'm trying to do, right? How many different business cases do I have to put together to convince someone that diversity is of a benefit to them, that equity helps boost productivity, right? Or why do I even have to frame things in that way? Can there be simply a moral argument that is made? And if people choose not to inhabit that moral space with me, okay, but you might get left behind. You are going to get left behind.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I think that one of the ways that DEI has been purely performative in a way that is unfortunately kind of, it's misguided because it's assumed to have more impact than it does, is we spend all this time trying to get people to understand us and, share our pain and, recognize our humanity. At the end of the day, Nathan, I don't care if people like me. I don't care if they like Black people as a whole. I don't care what they think about Black women. You're going to pay me what you pay the white men in your organization, right? You're going to make sure that I have the same benefits, So whether we empathize with people, whether we like them, whether we even understand them, those are things that it's too unstable a foundation to rest equity upon, to rest justice upon. So I would say, when it comes to really trying to boost the impact of the work that we do, we need to spend less time, unfortunately, trying to bring along people who are never going to take this journey with us anyway, and spending more time, more resources, equipping the people who are interested, who can be convinced, right? Or who are already doing a portion of this work anyway, right? I think that's where we make some real progress. And then, the Overton window shifts, the cultural momentum shifts, and maybe some of those people who hadn't been interested in taking this journey with us before start to see how far behind they've been left, and they start to catch up. So this is how, any advances we've made in LGBTQ rights, for instance, this is how it happens. At some point, people who had really regressive ideas realized they were being left behind by the culture at large and had to catch up. So I wish there was more of that. I want there to be more awareness that not everybody is terminally online, right? So, this goes back to where are the conversations happening? Is it happening just in the university classroom? Is it happening just in the comments of somebody's, Substack, article? But where is it happening? I cannot assume you are reading the same people I'm reading. I cannot assume you're watching the same TikTok videos that I'm watching. I cannot assume that we have the same level of education, understanding, commitment to certain things. So I have to be willing to ground myself and offer context and allow you to do the same thing when we have these important conversations. Otherwise, I don't think, we can truly expect people to understand the outcomes we're trying to, develop and strategize towards, and then meet us there or help us get there.
Mm.
And then I want, and I do think this is the case, but I want more visibility for it. There is a responsibility for people who sit in my chair, which is, I'm a paid DEI professional, right? At a for-profit company. And that means I bear a weight of responsibility to speak up for people who do not have a voice in the company, who do not have the forum that I do with leadership. So I cannot shirk away from having difficult conversations and making leadership sit in their discomfort before they ask the people who report to them to exist in a level of discomfort. I feel like, I had a conversation recently with some people in my firm who were saying, I don't really know what to do. I don't know who to go to when I experience a microaggression on the job, And I want people to know that they can come to me and I can have certain conversations on their behalf because I have a certain level of positional power that they don't, right? Um, and that matters in this context. So we have to put ourselves on the front line in a lot of ways, and let people know that we're willing to be on the front line in a way. And then people start coming to us more. We start having more of these kind of crucial discussions, hard discussions, and doing the kind of hard work that actually changes the culture and the places where.
I think you hit on something really important there is similar to the B Corp space of like letting these outcomes speak for themselves and not necessarily like trying to constantly prove that we're right. Like just let the results just go and just be able to kind of show that like you're gonna get left behind. Diverse teams do perform better. Diversity, and I've kind of cautioned that sometimes even in the B Corp community of like when we have no dissenting opinions, when we all because groupthink comes into that too. If we just kind of if we're this kind of like one size fits all approach to some of this, if we're all agreeing, it's kind of the ends because the diverse teams do perform better. Dissenting opinions, they say you get your best advice from your haters, like you don't like the way they tell it to you, but sometimes it's something that you needed to hear. And so I think a lot of these companies are going to get left behind. And I think if we just focus and do this right, we'll outperform the companies who don't want to get on board with some of this stuff. And we'll get the talent that they don't want. And guess what? It'll make us all better because we decided to bring in people that didn't look like us or think like us or act like us.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you say, like the work is going to speak for itself. The work, it already does speak for itself in many ways. I won't, be overly optimistic and say we're witnessing sort of the last kind of rabid, hysterical, like death throes of oppression, right? Or inequality in the United States. But there is a part of me that does think the really like virulent pushback that we're experiencing right now is partially due to the recognition that change has come and that there is a certain level of momentum that is increasingly undeniable. So you have these people for whom the world doesn't look the way that they expected it to look. Their privilege does not give them access to the same kind of like cultural or social or financial capital that they expected that it would. And so they are, viciously trying to hold on to something that in their heart of hearts, they already know is an increasingly hard for them to hold on to, right? That something has already escaped them. And so I hope we can fight through this moment, but we do not surrender to the obituary. Like we don't publish the obituary that, the alt-right has published for DEI because it's not the case. We are absolutely having to reassess. We are absolutely having to, regroup in a lot of areas. But again, this goes back to work on the ground, right? I'm a paid DEI professional. I collect money for this bi-weekly. I thank the Lord for it. But the fact is, there are people doing this kind of work who don't get no kind of check, who don't, have any kind of title. You can legislate what you want. You can executive order yourself into, whatever space you want to be in, but the work is going to continue and we can continue to acknowledge that work, keep pushing it forward and let the naysayers steadily sort of claw themselves into irrelevance.
Yeah. 100%. I always say that all the time. You can't legislate my values. I'm going to do this work regardless of what. Again, it's like the toothpaste is out of the tube with a lot of this. You have Gen Z coming up. They in a weird way, they've been raised, Gen Z and then the Gen Alpha, like they've been raised now in this world. I mean, not just the technology piece, but they're growing up in a month. Like my niece marched with me in the Pride Parade last weekend, and she's waving a flag. I don't like just, and it's just like we didn't go to Pride. Like I'm a upper crust millennial. I don't even remember Pride parades, let alone like my uncle being like, "Let's go!" Like
right.
And so I think they're growing up in a world where none of this. It will be weird when they meet somebody who is homophobic or transphobic or racist, they're just going to be
Hmm.
like you're the pariah.
Right.
And so
Right.
it's but again, it's that steady beat of like every generation has to fight for this, because it's not guaranteed.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
and even some of the stuff, like I want to kind of touch on something like the kind of the, I don't want to call it like the performative, but
Hmm.
how do we talk about like the distinguishment between performative DEI and kind of the meaningful community rooted work? And, especially like you and I talked on the planning call
Hmm.
kind of about like the commonality you said between Oakland and like the South, and
Yeah.
kind of this cross cultural connection. So I love to pick your brain on that topic and kind of, I mean, you're just dropping gems. So I'm just going to shut up and let you go.
Okay. Well, like I said, I'm always ready to put my foot in my mouth. So just know that if you get people leaving comments or whatever, you can just forward them to me. And I will take all the heat justifiably. Right. But yeah, when we were talking about like the like activist communities or the color and the vibrancy of activist communities, like workers on the ground. To me, I do see, some real like striking parallels between communities that I've either lived in, however briefly, because I used to live with family in the South, um, and communities that I see in the Bay Area, so Oakland, Berkeley, San Francisco, like all of those areas. And part of it is just there's a real realness to it. I understand like the term authentic and authenticity has it is problematic, right? We can unpack that all day long, but there's a certain level of authenticity to the way folks get down in the Bay Area and the way they get down in the South. And I'm, talking about, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida's got its own thing going on, right? But when we say like the American South, roughly the contours of what I'm talking about, right? there's a there's a way in which the heads of the movement, the people who are actually moving and shaking things, were not the people who were appointed by virtue of higher education or wealth, but simply who was willing to get down in the dirt, right? And push a plow alongside you or meet with you, bake a meal with you, come to your church, talk with your what, right? So is, everybody knows so and so because they always got $5 to lend you, or they're always willing to go give you a ride somewhere. That kind of like community based work happens in a way that just feels qualitatively different for me in a lot of ways, in the South and in the Bay Area. And I don't want to dismiss the incredible communities of workers elsewhere in the country. But I do think there's been more of a reliance on sort of external or mainstream um, sort of seals of approval. So and so went to this school, they got this degree, right? And so we listen to them. And maybe it's just me not having been in community with the right people, in other places in the country. I'm willing to admit that. All I know is when I go to the Bay Area or when I go down south, it feels very familiar to me, and it feels like, okay, I know what to do. I'm less worried about maybe the language that I use to describe something, or you know what I'm saying? Right. Because we're just doing the work. We're just doing the work. And I do not want to diminish the importance of really unpacking semantics in a way, because it does help shape how we think through things, right? But I want to make sure that we're thinking through. Truthfully, I don't care whether you call someone unhoused or homeless, as long as you are feeding those people while you're having those conversations. Don't make me have to pass, a certain level of understanding, or achieve a certain bar before I can even participate in the struggle. Is, I think, the way a lot of people get turned off. Like we can have these conversations, these theoretical conversations, while we're doing the work.
Yes. While we're doing the work, we went through it last year at Build Southeast with BIPOC and Black. I'm like, come to Atlanta. Nobody, the Russell Center shirts, it's build black business, unapologetic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there's but like a lot of people, I think when you don't live here and this isn't your lived experience, I heard somebody say that last year, like, don't come to Atlanta and tell me how to be black here. So one of my good friends said that, but if you don't have that lived experience, it's kind of difficult. That the language, we're not really concerned. And we had a panel last year too called "If You're Here for the Work, There's a Seat at the Table." And I mean, that's kind of always been, whatever you want to call it, the Atlanta way, that we kind of like, it's overused, but that's why we did that panel in Atlanta, though, it was like the United Colors of Benetton on stage. And so we don't necessarily do it the theoretical way, but we do it in a way that works for us when we're, and I grew up in Miami, kind of same thing, where we're just kind of on top of each other. And it's this melting pot of races and cultures and strong LGBTQ plus communities in both those cities. Like, we just kind of like, just kind of have to figure it out. And so, that's,
it's really interesting. You mentioned BIPOC, right? And the phrase, the term BIPOC, and the pushback in some communities to BIPOC, because they're like, listen, if you mean black, just say black, right? Because that's often what we mean.
I have friends that hate that term.
Right. And you have, or the term Latinx, right? You have many like native Spanish speakers who are like, this is not how I use language. It's not how my community uses language. So stop doing this out of a, well-intentioned but misguided attempt to be more inclusive. But then you have people who are themselves native Spanish speakers who are like, no, this term originated in the work that we did, right? So it's, you mentioned earlier, and I know I'm all over the place here, that some of the best work comes when we disagree. And I just read this great interview with Robin D.G. Kelly today. He's a historian. He's currently at UCLA. Brilliant thinker. And he was talking about how, like, the trap of confirmation in this interview. There's a comfort to finally finding your people, to finally being in a room where you can use a shorthand because everybody knows what you mean or everybody agrees with you, but those might not be the most effective spaces, nor are they the spaces that are perhaps the most conducive to growth. Now, I don't want to not advocate for the kind of safe spaces that marginalized folks traditionally have been denied, but there needs to be a space for the kind of openness to not having your ideas confirmed, right? To argue with people. It needs to be by mutual consent, right? Yes. We have to both agree. Like, I'm not trying to argue with people who are trying to argue things are not worthy of being argued. Like, we're not going to argue my humanity, as a Black woman, as a queer woman, or whatever, right? But we can talk about the language for things. We can talk about why you might not like the term Latinx, but another Spanish speaker might really embrace it. We can talk about why the term BIPOC doesn't particularly resonate with me, but I can see its utility in other spaces and with other folks. But we have to get into it. We have to get into those discussions. And this is still so new for a lot of people, right? This is still so new. It's largely out of, the late 60s and 70s that we start to see DEI being formed as a thing, like at the university level with, the introduction of like Black studies departments or women's studies departments. So we're still thinking through a lot of the stuff. And I do extend a lot of grace to the people who are like, listen, I may get it wrong, but at the end of the day, my heart is trying to do something for the people. But yeah, I was just struck when you mentioned BIPOC, because this is a frustration for a lot of people in the Black community. It's like, just say Black when you mean Black. Just say it, right? And if you don't mean just Black, if you also mean, people in the Latina community or Asian Americans or whatever, don't we deserve to be called out by name? Because when you don't, there's a flattening that goes on. There's a homogenizing that goes on that's inappropriate in almost every venue. Like, our struggles are different. Our solidarity may require us to be in the room together. We want to be in the room together, but there's rarely anything that affects us all in the same ways. So what does BIPOC as a term actually do for us? Where are we actually using it? I don't know. That was a digression, but as someone with a PhD in English, like language fascinates me. So I'm always going to be like, hey, let's pull up for a minute here and unpack what this is.
I think yeah, and I think that's the future. And we've touched on it already, but you hit on the how do we almost like the group think aspect of like when we do get to that point though, it's very unhealthy that we need to be able to like, okay, like for somebody like me who's very involved, I still use homeless and I go to Athens Homeless Coalition meetings and like I'm out on the streets cleaning up trash. I clean up with them, but and you'll have somebody kind of like attack you for being like, that's unhoused. And you're like, have you ever talked to one? Like, have you ever talked to a human being that lives on the street? You haven't. You drive by and you look the other way when there's like they're gonna like break through your window. So I think but we need to be able to have that conversation, and then I have to extend them the grace because they honestly they read it, they're passionate about it, they want to solve the problem, and it's like, okay, well, come with me then, And so how do we kind of like balance in the future as we kind of look towards the future of this work? I think. And I'll kind of close on that and ask you your opinion on like, I think that's going to be important, but what do you feel like this next, well, I'm not even going to say the next 3.5 years, but the next 10 years, the next 20 years, and the rest of our careers, our lives is going to look like, and what's important, and where does business kind of step up to kind of play a role in there, if any?
Yeah. Listen, for those of us who are in the workforce, I won't say blessed to have a job because, I fully support I fully support my people who are justifiably suspicious of capital, right, and the forces of capitalism. But for those of us, who are in the workforce, who are laboring, the ways that justice and equity and inclusion are affected at the workplace can have such incredible impacts for our lives outside of the workplace. And what I mean by that is, are you being paid fairly? Are the hours that you work, fair hours? Are you having to deal with, aggression or harassment or discrimination on the job, right? That affects your life outside of the workplace. So it is crucial that we do not stop our work in this period in which we are under fire, from the administration, from the sort of, technocrat class, or certain segments of, the technocracy in this company who believes entirely illegitimately in this notion of meritocracy that they see as being contrary to DEI's goals, which is, farcical, right? But we cannot say, okay, we're going to allow you the mic for the next 3.5 years, and then we'll just sort of pick up where we left off, as soon as you're voted out of office. We will lose so much momentum, and we will lose people if we do so, right? This work, it is, we have to keep tending this garden. We have to keep watering it. We have to keep feeding it. We have to keep checking in on people. And so in as much as, our individual companies, organizations have an appetite to fight, we got to keep fighting to that level and maybe stretch a little bit beyond so that there is something to return to when, God willing, this administration is voted out, right? So that's my commitment is whatever room you're in, whatever conversations you're part of, whatever circles you have access to, keep shaking the table, right? Keep shaking the table. Don't look for your supporters, look for your allies. We're in this together. There are more people for us than are against us, but we can't stop moving, right? An object in motion stays in motion, right? If we rest right now in a period where we should not rest, we need to be fighting harder, then what world will we wake up to, if indeed we wake up at all?
And don't fight with each other. We did that in 2017. We kind of turned in on ourselves and started canceling moderate. Like if we're on the same team, we got to stick together, whether we agree on the word or not the word. Like, are you working towards the same outcomes? Then then we're good. We can figure the rest out behind closed doors as family business.
Oh yeah, like I'll fight with a centrist liberal any day of the week. Like, come at me, But at the end of the day, if you show up with me to do the work, we're gonna do the work, and I'll be talking trash about you while we do it. Okay, like, I'm gonna read you for filth while we work together.
Oh, I can't wait. I got to get you down to Georgia. Let's do some work together.
Yeah, let's do it.
I see your good trouble sign behind you. We can get into something.
You know what? Yeah. I love this. I love it.
Well, Ebony, this could go on for hours. I wish I could too. I'm 20 minutes late to my next call, but I could talk to you for days.
I can't wait to talk to you again. I can't wait to talk to you again.
We need to get you down to Build Southeast in September.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Make that happen, and then you and I will go get drinks or something and get some Uncle Nearest and go to town.
I love it. And have someone on the outside ready to post bail.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's where our producer Quentin comes in. He's got him very.
All right, Quentin, you hear it. That's right.
So
keep the credit card out, Quentin.
So in the home of like Herman Russell, I see if there's somebody from the Russell Center who can keep that tradition alive and bail out the good troublemakers.
Right, right.
Oh man, Ebony. All right, we gotta end it. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for coming on. This is like one of the most amazing episodes. I can't wait to hear the finished product, but I'm just grateful for your time.
I've loved it.
And your energy and the fact that you're doing the work and you're kind of carrying the torch right now for a lot of people who can't do this work right now. So I'm grateful for you. Wish you all the best and all the success, and we're just going to keep doing it together.
Same to you, man. Same to you.
Well, that wraps up another edition of Be the Change Georgia. We're grateful, as always, for the opportunity to serve you with this content and grow this incredible community of purpose-driven B Corp leaders. If you haven't already, we would be grateful for you to rate the show wherever you get your podcast by simply tapping the number of stars you think it deserves and sharing it with a friend. This helps us get the word out and continue to use our collective influence as a force for good. This podcast wouldn't be possible without the help from our production team at Chat with Leaders Media. Learn how you can launch your own podcast to grow your business at chatwithleaders.com. Thanks again for listening, and now go be a leader worth following.